Hi, my name's Trev Hutchings and this is the Roland Ax Edge. The Roland Ax Edge comes in a pretty big box, but when you look inside the box you quickly realise why. The Ax Edge keyboard, or keytar, is pretty big. Also inside the box there is a strap, a power supply, a spare panel that replaces the one that's on there. It's not hugely different in colour. The one on it is silver because this is the white one, and the panel that comes with it is a gold one. Like I say, not a huge difference in colour. Also you get this little bag full of the screws, like the screws you got in here, and a hexagonal Allen key, so you can take these screws out, put the other panel on and put these screws in with that panel. These screws are silver, these screws are black. That's the only real difference between the screws. Also you get this little bag here. Inside the bag you've got a very basic owner's manual. If you really want to look at the stuff more in depth, you're going to have to download the manuals from the website. A little leaflet here about if you're going to use the device with MIDI cables, because if you use it with MIDI cables, these provide these little things here which suppress noise basically, and you put these on the MIDI cables. Also in the bag one of these little readme things, using it safely, pamphlets, and another little leaflet here which talks about these two little grommets that can be used up on the keyboard neck. On the top of the keyboard neck you've got a volume control and an assignable control, and these are little round controls, and you can put these grommets on them, and when you do that, in theory it makes it easier to move them with your thumb than just without them. And for the box, that's pretty much it. On the back of the Roland Ax Edge you'll find the battery box. Here you can put in 8 rechargeable batteries. According to Roland, the battery should last about 4 hours. I haven't really used it for 4 hours yet, but I think I'm getting at least 3 hours out of the batteries. Also on the back you'll notice they've got these little legs here. So if you want to put it on a table and use it as a standard keyboard, if you're that way inclined. Also you'll find on the back of the keytar you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 strap points. I've tried using, obviously you're going to use the end strap point for most point. So I've used the end one there and I've used the end one here. These are the two that I find most comfortable. I have tried connecting at the end there and this one, but although in theory the strap was in a better position on my body, the weight of the Ax Edge meant that it kept shifting, so I had to keep propping it up. So when you're using that one there and this one here, kind of the weight's all wrong. So maybe if you're using the strap pins, you need to use that one and that one, or that one and that one. I'm thinking that must be the way you have to do it to keep the weight distribution of the guitar correct. On the back of the Ax Edge, you've got at this end here, we've got 2 output sockets to connect cables to go to your amplifier. Next to that, we've got a headphone socket. Next to that, we've got a mic input socket where you can connect a mic for the vocoder. Next to that is an input level, so you can adjust the amount of mic input that comes into the vocoder. Next to that, we've got a cable clip for the power. Next to that is the input for the power. Next to that, we've got the on and off switch. Then we've got a grounding screw. Then we've got 2 MIDI DIN ports, one for in and one for out. Then we've got a port for input for a pedal. And over here we have 2 USB ports, one of which for a memory stick and the other one for direct connection to a computer. Up here on the neck, what we've got is on the top side here, we've got the volume control. Next to that, we've got an assignable control. On the front here, we have got program up and down. So when you press the -1, it takes you to the previous sound in the list, and you press on the plus, it will take you to the next sound in the list. Next to that, we've got the ribbon, and we've got modulation bar. And then here we've got the octave minus and plus, which will take you up and down an octave. On the back of it, we've got 3 buttons on the back of the neck. The first one is to turn portamento on and off. The second one is a hold button, and the third one is unison. So that's it for the neck. On the front panel of the Ax Edge, we've got a light unit here. This has 3-digit light digit unit, which will tell you what number sound you're playing. Then we've got a second digit light panel here. This is used for changing settings, so it's got more than just the 3 digits you've got there. And next to that, we've got a strip here of buttons that are used for the menu that's built into the Ax Edge. That particular menu isn't very deep. There isn't a lot of things you can do in there. You need the separate software to actually dig deeper. The next 2 buttons here are for the favorite bank. You've got 10 banks, and you can have 10 favorites in each of those 10 banks, so you can have 100 favorites stored on the machine. That's saving 100 different program sounds, so that it's easy for you to find them quickly. Next to that, we've got the programs themselves. There is 10 banks here, and there is 32 programs or sounds in each particular one of these banks. When you're using the favorites, these 10 banks here become the favorite banks instead of the program banks. Next to that, we've got the song player. Simple 2 buttons. When you press the list button, it will display on here what songs you got, and then you can use these buttons here which back forward buttons to choose which one of your songs you want to select, and then you've got the play button next to that. And the last two buttons on here is an arpeggio button and a lock button. Finally, on the front panel, obviously we've got the keyboard itself. There are 49 keys, so that's quite big for a guitar. 49 keys, which is one of the main reasons why it is so big. Although I do think the actual neck is much longer than it should be. That's obviously been done to make it look aesthetically pleasing, but it does contribute to the length or the size of the guitar quite unnecessarily, I think. The keys themselves are really nice keys to play. I've always liked Roland keys. You've got aftertouch on these keys, which is nice. The only thing I don't like about the aftertouch is it seems to take too much pressure to actually make the aftertouch work. And I've dug deep into all the settings that I could find, and I found nothing that is no settings to be able to change the amount of pressure required for aftertouch. So first impressions of playing the Ax Edge is, well, firstly, as I've said, I think the neck is too long. But having said that, it is nice to play as long as you've made sure that there's a couple of feet each side of you so you don't bump into things. As I've said, I like the keyboard itself. It plays really nicely. The sounds that are built in, as always, they've put in one or two sounds that are not really, shouldn't be there. But there are a lot of sounds on here that are really good. And the important thing about the sounds and the sound engine that's in here is if you really want to make your own sounds, the capability is there. If you get download the editor for the Ax Edge from the Roland website, it works on iPad, iPhone and Android, I do believe. Check with the website to make sure that whatever gear you've got will work with it. And it's also worth noting that on the sound side that Roland have a website called Axial where they put extra sounds in. If you go to that site, you can actually get some alternative sounds for the Ax Edge. You can change the sounds, and I must say the sounds in here, I do like quite a lot of the sounds in here. And if this video was worked out right, you've probably been already listening to the sounds in the background that are actually from this machine, and will continue to the end of this video. They're all standard sounds that are built in to the Ax Edge. And like I say, some really nice sounds. The vocoder, that surprised me. That's actually better than I thought it would be, particularly since you can actually use the vocoder if you're prepared to program it so with any of the sounds, which leaves it open to some really interesting options there. Obviously, because it's got a sound engine built into it, it actually weighs quite a lot. Probably about the same sort of weight as a reasonably heavy bass guitar. Some little things, little issues that I have with it. Firstly, the touch ribbon here, when using it to pitch bend, I'm finding it a little bit tricky. I don't know whether it's because it's just brand new and it needs to bed in or something, but it's not really, it's not as sensitive as I would like it to be. And if you push down too much on it, it's actually not just a ribbon, but it's also got a pressure sensitive to it as well, so you can end up actually generating an additional sound change that you weren't actually after. The modulation bar, it works fine. One or two things that I have noticed that I find are a bit strange. If you change the octave and then you change the program or the sound, it goes back, it takes the octave thing off, so it goes back to zero, so to speak. So if you like playing one octave lower, every time you change the sound you have to go and put the octave back down one again. Didn't actually have to do that on the Lucina, so I don't understand why it's on here. Perhaps in time I will, once I've used it a bit more, I'll decide whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Some quirks that I have seen that I don't particularly like is if you turn on the song player, you can't actually then change the sound or make any other changes until that button is back off. So if you put the song player on, you have to put the song player button on, choose the song you want, turn it off, and then press play to actually play the song. Okay, not a big problem, but it's something you just have to remember, that you've got to turn that button off before you start playing again. The arpeggio is another one that's kind of a bit weird to me. I'm not much of an arpeggio person, so maybe it's just me, but the arpeggio is based on the tempo, and if you actually want to change the tempo, you have to actually dive into the menu here. Quite a few steps down, so to speak, to actually get to the tempo and be able to change it. So it's not something you're going to be able to do in the middle of a song, for instance. It's only really something you're going to be able to do before you start a song. And for most of the time, that probably isn't too much of a problem. But it is worth noting that you can set the tempo by the sound, so that if you're setting up your own sounds and you want tempos that are different from the standard 120, you can actually set it in the program to whatever one. So you could literally have the same sound with 3 different tempos if you use them at different tempos in different songs, and then you could just use the arpeggio based on that. The arpeggio, the options for that are pretty basic, and I think if you're someone who's prepared to program, you'll find that there's a lot more diversity and capability from actually programming a sound rather than relying on the arpeggio. Once again, the same with the favourites. If you leave the favourite button on, obviously you can go through. I got 2 sounds on here at the moment, so when you press on the program plus or minus, because I've only got 2 sounds in the bank at the moment, it will just let me switch between those 2 and that's it. But that's fine. That's really what you want when you've got the favourites on. That's what you want to be able to do, is just simply be able to switch between the ones and the favourites. You don't want it to be switching between the original program, so to speak, which is pretty cool. I like that. The buttons on the back here, probably something you have to get used to, but because you can't see them, it's a little bit difficult to know which one you're pressing when. Up here you've got an assignable controller, which is great, but it has the same problem that a lot of controllers seem to have on machines, and that is there's no center point. So if you, very often this controller is set to affect the sound, but it's actually that center point where the sound is back to what it was originally. But because you've got no way of knowing where that point is, once you change the sound, you kind of go back to roughly where you think it is, but that's as good as you can get. I have dug into the sound side. I'm impressed with the ability of what you can do to change the sounds. I have played around with the sounds, and the nice thing is from the sound editor, once it's connected to the machine, You can make changes and then listen to them and decide whether you like them before you actually install them on the machine. So you can make changes to a sound and then go, no, I don't like that. And all you have to do, once you've turned the machine off and turned it back on again, that sound's gone. It's not been registered anywhere, so you haven't done any major changes. The tones, there are a huge amount of tones in here that you can use. Tones, you have like 4 tones, up to 4 tones that make a particular sound or program. So that can allow you to get really quite deep into the texturization of the sound that you want. And on top of that, you've got the vocoder as a separate one on top of that, which is really good. You can set the vocoder to be specifically using one of those particular tones, so that you can have a whole sound coming around and be playing a sound and still be singing through the vocoder at the same time, and it's not actually using the whole of that sound that you've got. It's just specifically using a bit of the sound for the vocoder. So I've changed a few of the sounds around. To me, it sounds like the sound engine in this is very similar to the Roland Juno. Obviously the Juno has more depth, more sound manipulation capabilities, but it is very similar, and I think you could probably get quite similar sounds on here to you could to a Juno. So if you're experienced with a Juno, then you're probably going to be able to program this pretty similar. If you're not into programming sounds, then this is still fine. I like a lot of the sounds on here, and I could quite happily just play this live and find sounds on here that would suit just about most things. These are all really quite good sounds. Yes, there are 1 or 2 that are not particularly good, but that doesn't matter, because if you're going to program this yourself, like I say, there's 10 banks of 32 sounds in here. If you want to program one of your sounds yourself, you have to replace one of the sounds, one of the programs that's already here. So the fact that there's some not so great ones in here kind of makes it easy for you to decide where to put your new sounds without losing the old. But it's also worth noting that you can download from the Ax site a list for the sound editor of all the sounds that are in here, so that if you change all these sounds, some of these sounds, and then you want to go back to the originals, there's a really easy way of just putting it back in, just using that package from Ax. Would I use it live? Yes, I would use it live. It's, albeit that there's a bit of weight problem to it, I would have to get used to that, and to be honest, if you're going to stand up with anything on you, you're probably going to get some sort of level of weight to get used to. I like the size of the keyboard. You can split the keyboard, but you have to do that inside the tones. So there's no actual split button here allowing you to use 2 separate programs. Not going to be a problem for me, because I'm into programming, so therefore I can split the keys to play whatever I want accordingly. But I think it would have been nice to have had the ability to split, particularly since the fact you've got 49 keys here, so, and a lot of the other guitars are only like 37, so it would have been nice to have the opportunity. But you do play a guitar differently than you would a normal keyboard or synthesizer, so maybe it's not that so important. Would I use this as a controller for a computer or a controller for another keyboard or sound module? No. Simply, I know it's got MIDI in and out on the back of it, but when it comes to controllers, apart from this assignable one up here, these 3 buttons on the back are not a whole lot of use to you in that respect. And yes, you've got the ribbon and this bit here, and maybe that's enough controllers for you if you wanted to control something else. But if I was going to control something else, I would probably want to use something that's got less weight to it. So, is the Roland Ax Edge worth buying? Well, if you just want a guitar that you can turn up at a gig and just plug in a couple of cables into a PA or an amp and just start playing, then yes, I think it's worth it. Or if you are a solo artist and you got your own backing tracks that you can play through the guitar, then once again, all you need: guitar, some cabling, microphone, mic stand, PA system, and you're sorted. So in that case as well, yes, I would say the Roland Ax Edge is worth it. There is only one thing that I would say, and that is when this first came out for sale in the UK, it was £850. Is it worth £850? I'm not sure I would pay £850 for it. I actually got this one here for £708. That's nearly £150 cheaper, and at that price, yes, I definitely think it's worth it. If you've enjoyed this video, do give us the thumbs up and click on that subscribe button. Cheers.